Hi guys, my name's Joseph. What's your name? Hi guys. So I use a bunch of sources for this talk, and like most things I make, it's a mosaic of which only a few shards find their origin with me. It's also very speculative, and not much of what I say can be grounded in fact, so don't trust me at that point. I aim as much to inform and express a very personal interpretation as to kind of explore myself. And find me at some point, and I'll get you all of the sources that I need. Okay. So like many first-generation kids I know, I can divide my life into before and after the realization that the culture I live in will probably never be mine. Typically, this realization comes in punctuated kids at the most normal moments. It came as an understanding of differences that are nurtured between me and the people around me. Mine came somewhere around middle school, when I realized that constantly trying to be funny was my thing. It was clear I was, more than I could have possibly been comfortable with at the time, a lot like my father in that way. And interestingly enough, when I became Jester, which is a community leader type role at nerd camp that I went to, 2 years ago, my ceremonial attire was this ridiculous red plaid coat without buttons. And it's almost the exact same one that my dad wears in the first like black and white pictures of him and my mother. And so when she tells this story, her face turns like bright red. And she manages to get out in this dainty and very proper Russian how out of place this coat looked on him, and how it was nothing she had ever seen before. And how it was almost so shameful that looking at it was like silly. And she says, so, I was walking from class to class in university the first time I saw him. My mother continues softly. He was joking with a group of friends, wearing this ridiculous plaid jacket. In it, he looked out of place as anything, so I married him. My mother remembers the end of the story differently than she does. After remarrying, she cut up the coat and made it to a canvas. He pauses, turning his next words over with a wry regret. I liked that coat. He managed to get out after a while, as if to say, what can you do? So when my family left, other bags were made from coats. On June 19th, the date of my parents' anniversary and their exodus to the States, they were only to take a single bag and a single $100 bill with them. My mother, always the more practical of the two, had looked up the largest possible dimensions that would be allowed on the plane. And she still has these sheets covered in like calc, which she presented to the Soviet border guard that said the bags were too large. My dad knew not to joke at the time, as he would have in any other airport under any other circumstance, because taking these last few bits of clothing and books was just too important. I hear this story kind of lying around the dining room, and I had this thought that was like, we make bags out of our old ways of living, it seems, to try and take them with us. And I think my parents would laugh at an analysis like that, but it works for me. He'd come back to joking, though, and my humor, like his, became kind of a way of seeing the world, rather than just a tolerable, so bear with me if you might have heard it before. So, a guy was sent from East Germany to work in Siberia. He knew his mail would be read by censors, so he told his friends, let's establish a code. If a letter you get from me is written in blue ink, it is true what I say. If it is written in red ink, it is false. After a month, his friends get the first letter. Everything is blue, it says, this letter. Everything is wonderful here. Stores are full of good food, movies show good films from the West, apartments are large and luxurious, women are generous and inviting, but the only thing you cannot buy is red ink. So my Pubspeak is called Why We Need Red Ink. And I've never lived in the kind of Siberia that he describes, but I did get raised by parents whose every habit and leaning was pruned by communist Russia, so it's basically the same thing. And I've noticed this kind of universal, which is a stereotype, that seems to emerge from these kind of post-communist mindsets. And that's a shadow of Russia that lingers on because the ironies that made that mindset come forth linger on. And that'll make sense in a minute. And I think the response to these ironies tells why we need certain forms of communication like humor. And I'm going to explore red ink, why we use humor, if it's a canary in a coal mine, if it's a distraction, if it's a window into our psyches, or if it's just another cultural phenomenon intellectuals love to pontificate over. So I'm stereotyping, a few notes first. I'm stereotyping because I've been cursed in knowing only educated Russians who are politically involved, and the type of hyper-literate culture that I'm extrapolating from might not be as pervasive as I suspect. I took it on faith from my father, though. He said that if you were actively literate in Russia, you were more literate than the literate in America. There was not much else to do there aside from read what you could mean. Because I vacillate between believing in the spectacle of these outspoken Russian political figures, which I'll get to in a bit, that believe, and I believe that like their self-deprecating, sardonic, and wide-eyed rhetoric is the only true vehicle towards change in such a country, or believing that there are these kind of court gestures that are tolerated for their ability to take people's minds off, beheadings and so on, with that analogy. Now, in a country where the criminal conviction rate is about 99%, thinking about speaking out gets scary and hard, and the House always wins, so it's hard to think about your place in it. So I always heard these stories from the 1920s till Khrushchev's secret speech with regards to desalinization in front of the Politburo, how there's this thing called Article 58 of the Federal Penal Code. I'll read out a part of it. It defines a counter-revolutionary action as any action aimed at overthrowing, undermining, or weakening the power of workers and peasants, or Soviets, and governments of the USSR and autonomous republics, or at least the undermining or weakening of the external security of the USSR and main economical, political, and national achievements of the proletariat revolution. So there's a guy named Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who you guys might know from the Global and stuff. And what he wrote is, "Who among us has not experienced this all-encompassing embrace? In all truth, there is no step, thought, action, or lack of action under the heavens which cannot be punished by the heavy hand of Article 58. And a bit of what this looks like, how this looked like in reality. Okay. You're not supposed to understand that, but there'll be a subtitle in this one second. You guys got the picture of that? Yeah. Right? So like,
what is the plot?
Right, okay, alright, so here we go. Okay, so yeah, so he'd say 3 words and they'd clap for about 10 minutes. Now, you'll see the same kind of thing now, like at King Jong-il's funeral, for example. Everybody was crying these huge crocodiles tearing the slum. But it's not because they're sad, and it's not because they're happy, right? I mean, they're sad, these guys are happy, but it's more because you couldn't be the first one to stop crying or to stop clapping. Because if you stop clapping, you don't see your family when you get home because you don't get home, and so on. And I've seen too many sources that kind of capture this better than I could. And so what I'm really doing here is, like, it seems kind of crude, but it's impressing how this was. So here's a paragraph. This guy named Lachlan writes "Laughter in the Dark," and it's about the bipolar nature of Soviet humor under Stalin. And he talks about this guy named, this like rightist cartoonist named Bukharin. Okay. So Bukharin owed much of his popularity in the party he was ready with. When he was forced to publicly recant his opposition to Stalin at a crowded party central committee meeting in December 1930, Bukharin survived this ordeal by mocking his former supporters amongst the right deviation. Reading the transcript with hindsight, the levity of the meeting has an ominous air. Bukharin, doomed to be executed 8 years later in spite of this, wisecracks in order to win his way back into favor. He jokes about the mass murder of rich peasants and shooting party oppositionists. The transcripts record laughter erupting throughout the hall on half a dozen occasions in response to Bukharin's brief confession, but now it seems to be the hollow, nervous laughter of the living dead. The majority of those present would be executed before the end of the decade. The cruelty of Stalinist laughter escalated in tandem with the brutality of the purges. Bukharin was no longer cracking jokes when he mounted his last defense against accusations of treachery at the Central Committee plenum of February 1937, so 8 years later when he was about to get killed. Nevertheless, the audience of accusers, hysterical, terrified, and vicious, found his wheedling attempts to escape death hilarious. "Why are you laughing?" Bukharin whined. "There's nothing funny about any of this." But they were no longer laughing with him, they were laughing at him. And this nightmarish, bedtime laughter served as a vital release of tension for the survivors to preserve their own sanity, display unity, and prove their loyalty to their boss. So he died in 1937, 1938. My grandparents were born in 1930, and they spent childhoods learning and cultivating such norms. There's a lot to be said for the development of reactionary folk culture from Stalin onward, but I want to get current about this pretty quickly. A quick overview would tell us that religion could no longer be practiced in any way that didn't bastardize it, and that cultural ties were burned away when any legitimate congregation was banned. These things existed, but it was like the bare bones of any way that you could communicate with anyone. Humor became, as Lachlan put it, the only party to which the party was not invited. So it was dangerous to be funny or to crack jokes. So let's talk about why we crack jokes. I personally think humor is special and vital because of all the genres and forms of human communication. It lets us send the most information per packet. Freud, Hegel, Schopenhauer, Spencer, Hutchinson, Hobbes, etc. all tell us with varying degrees of language that humor is a natural response meant to resolve a sort of cognitive dissonance. They disagree whether it's to display superiority, i.e. you laugh at someone because your life makes a lot more sense than what their lives make sense. Like when you laugh at somebody, for example, slipping on a banana peel. You laugh because you're not slipping on a banana peel. Or to behave as a safety valve for the pressure produced by competing incongruous realities. Primates bare their teeth when they're threatened or when they're in discomfort. We do the same thing. We smile. Reconciling the expected with the perceived surprises us. It disorients us, and we delight in it. Make of that what you will. I'm sure before you know. So this is also a universal thing. Babies, no matter their ethnicity or culture, they smile. It's a natural, like it's not a cultural thing. Although, an interesting aside here, Chuck Klosterman has a piece that I'll kind of paraphrase from, where he talks about how we insert laugh tracks into our lives, kind of to allow us to, relieve ourselves. In the U.S., when you're making small talk with someone and they say something like, "I just moved here from Denver," it gets really confusing to go around. You go, "Ha ha," and they laugh back. That's how a laugh track works. You laugh, but it's a fake laughter that you use in conversation. He says that in Germany, nobody does that. If you make someone laugh in Germany, it's because, they found you funny. And he says that once he got back to America, he kind of noticed that. Like, you'd have, a meeting in a bank, right? And you'd, laugh, and you guys would smile to each other, to the teller, as you're withdrawing money. But there's nothing funny about that exchange in and of itself. You just do it. Anyway, so why do we use comedic to, carry across so much information at once and not tragic or dramatic forms of, speaking? And I think it's because you can't censor a folktale, and that because proverbs have no capacity for reflexivity. And I'll explain what that means. Joke telling, this is Lachlan again, is the last refuge of popular rebellion because it's impervious to police measures. No one writes a joke, though everyone rewrites them, so you can't arrest the author. You can't raid a house and seize a joke. You can't put it in prison. You can't shoot it. It's compact. You carry a lot of them in your head, and you can't really get them out. The KGB supposedly experimented, and they found that it took a half a dozen hours for a joke to get from one end of Moscow to the other. So they move fast, too. And they're these little packets of information. He says that they go hand in hand, which means that if somebody comes over to you and you're not laughing, they can't ask you what you're laughing at, even though you're doing it inside. Like, you can make it innocuous if you want to, if you're trying to be subversive. You get to choose if it flies over the authority set. Russian is also kind of interesting, and this is another one of those brief asides where, so English, the way that we kind of communicate objects and verb tenses is we use sentence structure, right? We have the antecedents and so on and so forth. You have parts of the sentence, and that's how you figure out what's referring to what. In Russian, you don't have it. In Russian, you can rearrange the sentence no matter in any way you want, as long as you keep tiny little phrases together. So that allows for more kind of connotative meaning in how you rearrange that sentence. And then when you say it again, you can change it up again. So it survives a bit more. So yeah, jokes are also interesting, like these ones, are interesting and fun because they teach us what we find ridiculous. If somebody makes a joke and we find it distasteful and inappropriate, it allows us to ask why. What sacred territory are we encroaching upon? Ergo, more complex forms of humor like irony and written satire allow us to probe the constraints that we normally can't talk about. When we find a straight-faced description of some Byzantine bureaucratic dance that a government goes through in order to make you get something ridiculous, we laugh, and we realize that it is ridiculous because we laughed at it. And you don't really get that anywhere else where you have a response that you don't understand until after you think about that response. So you have to go through all this mindless bureaucracy and something terrible happens and you laugh at it and it's ridiculous. But where can you go from that realization? Yeah. So yeah, a saying goes that true Russian love or connection is finding someone who understands the misery of life as deeply and truly as you do.
Wow.
Solidarity, when they told these jokes, was this mirthful yet sober exchange of understanding. Augmented to the extent by which all reality is filtered and broadcast through the official interpretation, people had this enormous amount of popular culture because everybody read the same books as a kid, recited the same nursery rhymes, remembered the same party slogans. So you have more commonalities to make fun of. People, this led to this universal audience for the official interpretation of reality, which they realized was inhumane nonsense. There's this guy named Henry Bergson who thinks this is the fundamental comedic stimulus. It's realizing that something mechanical is encrusting upon the living, that those two incongruous realities of just things not making sense because it's something inhuman posing as something human. Mary Douglas calls this the central problem of all interpretation. She says, when people react to this, when they throw excrement at one another whenever they meet, either verbally or actually, can this be interpreted as a case of wit or merely written down as a case of throwing excrement? When people make these ironic statements that they share, are they making meta jokes about their way of life? My question actually, I'm sorry, is are they poking fun at the bird shit on the statue, or are they blasting it with water? Are you getting rid of what's inhuman on the human? So yeah, so this is a reality now. I'd like to maybe characterize the Russian Federation now. So remember, with Comrade Stalin, you couldn't stop clapping. With Putin, you can kind of stop clapping, but you can't start booing. In that If you start to do so, like there was this kid that started an anti-Putin Facebook group, his door got knocked down. And they searched his house and copied all his media, like his videotapes, his phones, they tapped everything. And he would cry like those same crocodile tears that they did, at Kim Jong-il's funeral. Like, things don't make sense, but you can't stop them because you realize that. And Russia, they don't skirt around how this is. There's no sense of appropriateness. You might have heard the story, there was this guy, this former KGB FSB agent, who he found refuge in the United Kingdom, who was assassinated. His name is Alexander Dmimenko. And the basic story is, so this guy moves to London in about 2006. He starts publishing more and more stuff about what the KGB did. He was a former KGB agent. So they send 2 KGB agents to his house, and they spike his tea with polonium-210, which causes you to die in about a month and a half in like the worst way possible. He was decaying in front of the eyes of the world as they were trying to diagnose him. And it was a very public spectacle. And people protesting now, like holding up the signs that said that 146% of Russia supports Putin, which is based on all these like slogans, not slogans rather, but all these pamphlets that were produced showing election numbers. In some districts they added up to 146, which makes no sense. But yeah, so you protest, you hold up these signs. Another one is like, we did not vote for these bastards, we voted for the other bastards, we demand a recount. You don't get to do that because there were a bunch of kids, for example, in Moscow who were doing stuff like this. They get sent away to like say psychiatric institutes. They get it's punishment, and it's in such a way that it ruins the rest of the life. It's pretty horrifying. Now, I don't know about how this like exchange of wit and throwing excrement has developed because I don't live in Russia right now. But there are a few people that I've been kind of following, and I'd like to tell you a tiny bit about them. And kind of like you might not be getting the sense of how like they approach it so sarcastically, but it's the only truthful way to approach it. For example, there was this lady named Ksenia Sobchak, who's like this Russian reality TV host. And they call her the Paris Hilton of Russia, except she's the kind of Paris Hilton that can quote Joseph Brodsky off the cuff. So she's pretty cool.
Right.
Yeah. So she takes a video of a former government employee, a leader of a youth group, eating in one of the most expensive restaurants in Moscow. And she posts it to the internet. She kind of ambushes him with the camera and starts asking him questions, and he's kind of flustered and embarrassed. And she posts this on her Twitter page, to which a government-sponsored Twitter immediately replies, it's clear this means nothing, she's just a cheap prostitute. This is a government-sponsored Twitter page. The public demands, an apology, and after a day or two, the Twitter page comes out with another one. We apologize for exactly what we said. She is no cheap prostitute, she's very expensive. And, yeah. So that's kind of normal. It's nothing compared to other things. There's one guy who's considered right now the only possible real opposition to Putin. His name's Alexander Navalny. And the way he kind of approached it, so after a few rallies that he led, his house got searched. So they break down his door in the middle of the night, and these guys come in, and for 13 hours they copy everything. They take all his tapes, they copy them, they tap his phones, they break into his iPads, like right in front of him. And so for 13 hours he kind of hangs out, doesn't really ask questions, they don't let him shower. And then a kind of crowd has gathered around, because he usually blogs, and there's kind of conspicuous absence of contact with him. So a crowd gathers, and on the 13th hour he comes out, and he's like, I had a great time. I had a really good time proselytizing these guys. I got to tell them everything about my position, and they all promised me they would join my party, the instant that I started one. And as opposed to like breaking down, they realize the only thing they can do is kind of throw up this demeanor. Like he realized, he said to everybody in this YouTube video, like off the cuff, that like the only thing, this was only to scare them, and that he would fight them, but the best thing to do is just to keep going to these rallies and to stop. Yeah. Okay. All right. But they may not be as influential as they think. These like internet savvy heroes. And there's a recent New York Times article called "The Stiletto on Putin's Side," where the author describes this guy named Gusev, who is imagine him as like the leader of the journalists' union, but it's a government kind of controlled journalists' union. And he sneers at like all these things, and he says that the virtual world is where the opposition lives. The internet, he said, is at least 80% garbage, lies, distortion, nonsense. Bloggers, he went on, live in social networks far from reality. But Ksenia and her revolutionary friends forget one thing, that's the Paris Hilton of Russia. Putin lives in this world, he says, his fingertips tapping the table and his shoes the floor, and he is not one to quit. So, we throw around all these jokes and we realize how ridiculous it is, but does it really help? So Solzhenitsyn, this is my last quote, I promise. Solzhenitsyn, in one of his last published piece ever, before the breakdown of the Soviet Union in 1972, writes that things have almost reached rock bottom. A universal spiritual death has already touched us all, and physical death will soon flare up and consume us both and our children. But as before, we still smile in a cowardly way and mumble with our tongues tied. But what can we do to stop it? We haven't the strength. He offers a solution, and he says, say only what is true and real. Stop joking about it. Do not for a single syllable give in. Do not live what he calls the lie. If not, he says, if we get cold feet, even taking this step, then we are worthless and hopeless, and the scorn of Pushkin should be directed to us. Why should cattle have the gifts of freedom? Their heritage from generation to generation is the belled yoke and the lash. So I kind of asked back, and this is my personal question about all this. I as part of my role, I had the jester's bell and coat, and is it our heritage to kind of wear that? We want, like Brian Yor told us a few weeks ago, to consume our time in the process of making fruitful things. And I deliberate, kind of. Are we all, and not you guys differently than me, but just the way I see it, playing with like these little matryoshkas as free Americans? We can buy red ink, we can do whatever we want. And is it an insult for us to live this way, joking about it? And is it profaning the immediate and sacrosanct reality to the hundreds of millions of Russophones, which is the castling move in chess, where the king and the castle switch places to protect each other? I talk with my grandparents, and they say that the recent house turndowns, as they're lovingly called, are child's play compared to what was. 14 days in jail is nothing compared to 4 decades in the labor camp. So back to humor. They say, like they kind of joking will at least keep us on our toes. It's our version of casting ridiculous, what David Foster Wallace would call staying away with our eyes open. Yeah. In poetics, Aristotle thought that laughter is what separates us from animals, and it's an approximation of truth. It's what Nabokov would call being aware of being. I don't think it's that close. I think that it's realizing incongruity, and that living like that, seeing everything through that sort of ironic tint, is knowing your walls. But it may just be enough to distract us, to convince us that as we throw our wit and excrement about, we are willingly putting on that contented cow's collar and bell. I say, if it's all a joke, then so be it. There's still fun to be had while we're all laughing in the dark. Thanks. That was a lot, and thank you for letting me do that. Questions?
What do you think of Ronald Reagan's excellent Soviet jokes?
I actually watched a bunch of those. They're really funny. If you ever want those, I know way too many of those, and they're kind of spouting them out like chimney smoke.
I know.
Anytime.
Give us one.
What?
Give us one.
I can do it off the top of my head.
There's one he's really famous for giving. It's in Russia it takes 10. In Russia 17.8% of people or whatever, some tiny statistic, owns a car, as opposed to America where it's more than half.
So I was gonna tell.
Yeah. This is the one he's most famous for telling. It goes that it takes 10 years to once you order a car to delivery day. And like with most things in Russia, it's a terrible wait, it's bureaucratic. So a guy finally makes it to the end of the line, and he's talking with the guy that's going to deliver his car, and he's like, what day? He's like 10 years from this day. And the guy wants the car. He's like, is that going to be in the morning or the afternoon? And the guy's like, it's 10 years from that. And the guy's like, yeah, well, the plumber's coming in the morning. So. Sure.
Okay, so who's a commissar, an agricultural member of the party, going off to a farm, and it's a potato farm, and they grow potatoes there. And so the commissar wants to see how the agriculture is doing, what progress they're making. And so he looks around. He goes to one of the farmers and he says, "Comrade, how are the this is the Soviet Union. There is no God." And the farmer responds, "That's okay, Comrade Commissar, because there are no potatoes here."
Yeah. My favorite one is Khrushchev jokes to the people, "How are you doing?" "We're fine." They joke back.
So I wonder if you think humor can be overdone. Like, for instance, at my school, I see a lot of times, like, I have a lot of unpleasant experiences where if I try to express, like, a legitimate interest in something, or a legitimate, like, passion for something, I'll get a lot of, like, really ironic, like, "Oh, Julian, you pretentious douche." reactions. So it's like, no, actually, what? And that really, it's like a negative use of humor. What do you think of that?
I think irony is really interesting because the way that, like, when somebody says something to me that I consider overly serious, I can joke with them by saying something overly stupid. And they realize that because I would never normally say something, normally say something so stupid, they realize that both A, I understand how serious they're being,
right.
So I'm responding to them in that way, and B, I'm changing it in such a way that it can't be changed back. You can't interesting way of communicating truth.
I think it is, but I also see with these specific people I'm thinking of, you can't have a legitimate conversation
Yeah.
with them as a result of it, except for like, actually, I've never been able to as a result of it.
Well, they suck, so I'm sorry.
Well,
First of all, did you collaborate with the other two people doing Pubspeak?
No, I really like how it kind of.
Secondly, did you just make up the thing about the KGB tracking a joke from one side of the city to the other?
No, stories came out. They would. That's not the most
How
insane
does that
thing they
even?
did.
I mean, that doesn't seem possible.
It's the KGB. What do you expect? A lot of these examples are overdone. They kind of get like stuff like that actually. That was a project that no one was supposed to talk about, but they did anyway, and they committed manpower to it. You know, that's how like it's crazy. Like it's ridiculous, right? But
I'll let it go.
it's how it was.
I don't
Yeah.
understand
I mean,
how
they
that
gotta
is.
employ everyone somehow.
Yeah. Alex, I'm sorry. Alex, what are you from?
Okay, well, first of all, I just want to say thanks for talking about that because I really appreciate it. Because it's more of a comment on the question. But like, so my parents, they fled. They're the immigrants from Vietnam, and that's the time like then they're still communism today. But like, I appreciate it because like I empathize when you say we make jokes to like make things lighter or like get a better reality. Because like for instance. You know the dictator Ho Chi Minh,
Yeah.
and now he's dead. Well, it was really oppressive back then. So now, to make light of the situation, we say like whenever we're going to take a shit, that you say we're going to visit him in Vietnamese. So it's like, I really, when you said that we always make those jokes to like make things more comical and just laugh about it at the end of the day, I really just empathize in the sense that we get to appreciate what we have now, I guess.
Right? Like we leave Nazis kind of that. We don't make jokes about we make jokes about Comrade Stalin, but not about Hitler, right? And there was this really, I wrote like 2 dissertations for this, I don't even know why, but there was this one ending with one where they explain how kind of that, the reason we do that is we're laughing at ourselves, because communism is a complete subversion of the Enlightenment ideals that we kind of all grow up, that over the past, 500 years we've all kind of grown up living with, about individuality, and it's a complete subversion of that. But fascism kind of makes sense. Communism brings itself down, but we needed somebody else to bring fascism and Nazism down. So we don't laugh at it because it's something more powerful than our laughter. Laughter kind of brought down the Soviet Union more or less. Because it didn't work. It was ridiculous for the exact same reasons we laughed at it. Fascism, on the other hand, it's a bit of a trickier territory. That was kind of an interesting philosophical point. Yeah, hey.
It's really interesting you went to fascism and Nazism because that's what I wanted to say. Is that like in school this year we did like just a course on Nazi Germany, and one whole unit was humor in Nazi Germany, and there were a lot of Nazi jokes that were not like Germans to tell that I was. And I guess my question would be, how big of a role do the resistance movement and almost numbed it in the sense that like people joked and then they stopped there? Like, do you think humor is a good tool for like in terms of like subverting politics or?
I'm gonna generalize here and say that so like right now using saying 99% 1% is a very quick it's a very quick hyperlink to that entire idea of class warfare and all these issues and like median income being an issue and so on and so forth. In Russia, they're kind of like, right now 146%. If you say that, they'll know what you mean. The same way that, for example, it's an easy way of capturing and linking ideas. For example, right now, there's this Navalny, he made up this moniker for United Russia, which is like the leading party in Russia. And he called them the party of crooks and thieves. It rings better in Russian, but it was, they're kind of, he took their slogan and he made it into kind of like these badgers with like these rucksacks of like a burglar. Right? And that stuck because it was both it was ridiculous, but it painted them well. And now the first thing, 18% of people say the first thing that comes to their head when they think United Russia is party of crooks and thieves. So I think it makes a big difference. It's kind of how you start. It's an easy way to inject a thought that kind of stays.
Can you say that in Russian?
I don't. No, I'm terrible, actually.
I guess kind of follow up to Andrew's question.
Yeah.
Do you think that humor could ever serve as like sort of like a catharsis in the regard like that it underlines actual action to some degree?
Yeah, I mean we joke about stuff, and that was our rebellion, and we're done, kind of. And like we didn't really do anything about it. I think it depends. I mean, it's a very abstract kind of question to grapple with. But I'd say that, yeah, like the class clown doesn't really do much to help, you know, the discussion go forward. You can kind of stop it and make fun of it for a second, but that doesn't tell people what's wrong about it. And I think that's the difference between good types of humor and bad types. It's how I would compare Colbert and Stewart a little bit. How, yeah, I think. Although it's bad because Colbert never convinces me of anything. He's too strong. But Stewart will alternatively, like, I'll start hating him and then I'll start loving his points even though I don't want to. It switches up because he stops discourse, asks that we laugh at it, and then suggests another direction for it to flow from that point. Yeah, Jeff.
I guess it's kind of the opposite question, but how do you say the guy who wrote the Gulag Archipelago? How do you say his last name?
The what?
He wrote the Gulag Archipelago.
Solzhenitsyn? Yeah,
He
The Day in the Life of...
Yeah, he also wrote the Gulag Archipelago. And in it, like he uses humor a lot, like especially when he talks about the purges. But at the same time, he oscillates between like this very funny humor and very Russian of certain issues, and like help compel action when it's used like in parallel, I guess. Because that was my experience with book reading.
In short, yes. And I have a funny joke to that, but then can wait until maybe. Yeah. But in short, yeah, you said it. Cool. Thank you guys. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, like,
Sorry.
I guess it's like, would you consider yourself first gen, second gen? Maybe like.
The way that I always heard the nomenclature used is that I'm first generation because I'm the first generation that was born here, and my parents are the 0th generation because they weren't born here, but they are here.
So I guess like you drew like the whole section here in college. So I guess it's sort of a personal question, so if you don't want to answer this,
Sure.
but like,
Okay.
do you think that that's a mantle, if you will, that you're choosing to take up, or is it more involuntary sort of subscription to the line of communication that ties you to it?
I'm thankful for this is very dramatic, but that kind of upbringing forces you to see certain things in different ways. I think one way I put it this way. So there have been studies about bilingualism, and they show that bilingualism is much easier. It's much easier to get from 2 to 3 than from 1 to 2. And that's because they say that bilingualism teaches that objects can be viewed in abstraction, that they are not the name that is applied to them, right? That you can call one thing different names, and that helps you think about the nature of the object and about communication and about those different things. And I'd say with that, kind of having to view things more critically makes you kind of see how you don't take them for granted, and that's such you get to kind of poke at them a little bit. And it's very romantic interpretation of it and very self-aggrandizing, but I think that that's a little bit true. Yeah, thank you. All right, so sorry about that. Thank you guys.